Look at this mess. So today we are working on getting our alternator to charge our batteries with a DC to DC charger. What we're doing is this is kind of like a factory bus bar that connects to the battery. This little plate attaches right there. And these kind of feed off of different fuses. This one here is a big fatty that goes around, comes in here, right there, and feeds off into a few other spots. You see a red wire there, red. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4 wires off of there, off this big one that comes in. For instance, this one right here, the candy cane, that goes to the factory rear AC unit that's no longer installed. So this one I will probably most likely leave because the wires already pre-ran to the back of the van, and I might be able to use this for something in the future since it's already there, as long as the amps match and it's the right size. But for today, I've got a few options here. You see there's one spot. This right here is where the MIDI fuse will go. If you're wondering what a MIDI fuse is, it is a small fuse. It's just what Mercedes uses in these factory spots. Let me pull it out here and show you. 60 amp fuse, it connects these here like that. The problem is it doesn't actually have any power because this is not touching that. My thought is, with the help of Christian Stolp, somebody that builds vans on the side, he was kind of giving me some ideas to either bridge it here and kind of, you know, mill it out. But the problem is this thing isn't big enough. It's barely going to get a connection there. And what I ultimately decided is I'm going to tap into this big one right here and then run my 4-gauge wire out the back to the DC to DC charger and run a fuse back there. And one of my reasons for that is, well, simplicity. The other reason is if I do blow a fuse, I'm gonna have to get in here to the battery thing, and it's just more time consuming. With an A&L inline fuse, if I have it back there with all my other fuses, it'll be much easier to go through and change them out if something happens. And also, this just doesn't fit quite right anyway. So my options are, it doesn't really want to go on there. My options are to put that on there, see, it's like stuck on there now. It's so tight. Is bridge this with a piece of steel like this, or copper or whatever, and then do that there. This one right here just seems to be just a better spot. So we're gonna try and do that today. And then we're gonna use our negative off our battery. That thing got messed up. It's a long story, but this does not really have a lot of spots to basically connect off of. So that one goes to a light, some lights up front, and this thing is a huge pain because it doesn't actually come off very well, and like it doesn't thread. It's not really made. It's made to loosen and raise, put back down, but not actually attach anything to. So that was tough. But I have these other things connected to it, and it makes it complicated as well because now you're dealing with, I can't change this out without having to cut these wires and bypass these factory connectors. So this one's gonna be a little tough. We're gonna figure it out one way or the other, and we're gonna see how it goes. You may be wondering about the starter signal. I guess you would call, I think they call it a D+ signal, positive. And what that is it basically tells the DC to DC charger to start charging and start pulling from the alternator / battery. There's a couple different ways to do it. You can really get in here and test, dive in and find a fuse that or a group of accessories that only turn on once the vehicle is running. However, Another suggestion by Christian was, you know, just tap into like this 12 volt, which this on the other side is a 12 volt kind of cigarette lighter, old fashioned. And this thing only operates when the key is on. Now, the problem with that is if you have the key on and you don't have the vehicle running, you're going to be pulling from your battery, because this is going to send a signal as soon as the key is on or the accessory mode is on. And I know personally there's been times I'm listening to a podcast or a song and I turn off the vehicle and I sit there and I finish it or listen to the rest with the vehicle off, because when you're sitting in your Sprinter, the thing stays in accessory mode until the door is open. Now, the problem with that is this thing will drain the battery, because you're going to be sucking off, you're going to be taking 50 amps, up to 50 amps from your battery while you're sitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount a switch here in one of these holes here next to this by my side of my seat. If you're wondering, this is where my seat is, right here, driver's seat. And so when I am sitting and I am just have my accessory mode on, I'm going to reach down here with my hand, turn off the switch to kill that so that I don't drain my battery, just as a backup, is kind of a safe thing. And I kind of like the control of that. So if for whatever reason I don't want to be using my alternator, maybe I'm having, say, a low battery issue, maybe my battery is like, my car almost didn't start, my Sprinter just barely started, my battery's dying, I want to be able to shut that off so I'm not drawing off that in an event of like a emergency, or just, you know, to not drain my batteries. So what I ended up doing here is I ended up finding a switch over here, which I believe to be an engine running switch, which is not just accessory switch, it's the engine has to be running. But I still wanted to utilize the switch on my own, where I could turn it off and on. And so I mounted a switch here. And let me see if I can flip this around so you can see it. Oh, we can look down here. It's upside down, but you get the idea. That'll give me the ability to turn the alternator charging off and on. It's right down there. And I had to use 2 red wires. I marked one with a black, but with a ground. But anyway, I was going to use this. I ended up connecting it back together with a Wago connector, because I was like, you know what, I think this is that. And so hacked into this one right here. I shouldn't say hack, but yeah, then I got the switch here, those wires. I drilled a hole for that just to give it some relief. And then I went straight to the, it's covered now, but I went to the red, the extra spots, which I had showed earlier, which is the bigger spot. I went in there and I'm going to do an A&L fuse in the back. And then for the ground, I was able to make it work on that stock post without messing things up, so that worked out great. And then, sorry, it's a disaster in here. So what I did, I ran it back behind there, through that trim piece, up this pillar, actually till about right there, and then found a hole that I could send it through, and there's, see the ignition wire there. Fed it through. I took this panel off to get to it. It goes around behind the wheel well there, and then I'm still working on this. It looks like a mess here, but it came over the top, and I've got the stuff here, so just gotta wire it in and then see how it all works out. Right now I am testing the switch, my positive or D plus switch. It's off. I'm going to turn it on. I didn't wire it to light up. I just didn't want to worry about that. So I hooked that up to the ground from that, just because I needed a good solid ground just to test it, because it's just a red wire. It's one positive signal. And let's see what we can get here. Touch in there. We are getting 14.86. Perfect. And then let's try it with the switch off to make sure we got it wired correctly. And again, this has to be going when the motor is running, the engine's running, because I have it to that wire. And so I guess we could test it with the accessory just to double check, but I'm pretty confident in it. And let's see here, touching there. Oh, barely, but no signal. It's exactly what we want to see, so that this will only come on and send a signal to the DC to DC, and it'll send a signal when the motor is running and I have that switch turned on to basically start charging, start pulling from the alternator to keep my batteries topped off. So quick overview of what I did. That right there is the override for the alternator signal wire. And again, underneath here, I wired in the 4-gauge wire, positive, negative to the battery terminal, which is under here in this area. And this switch here, underneath, there is a I don't know if you call it a 3-bay, or there's 3 little wires. There's a diagram online and it'll show you which one it gets signal only when not when the accessory is on, but when the actual ignition is on. And so I tapped into that and then ran the other end of the wire to the back, which I'll show you in a second. And then for the ground, I just used the ground off of this little 12 volt right there. And it's working out great. It seems that the thing doesn't get a constant signal. So for instance, when I had it off, I turned it off while it was on and it seemed to still be charging off the alternator. So I think it's something you got to turn off or on before you get started. But I've got to test it a little more because my batteries are full right now. So it's not really working like as it would if it in an everyday circumstance. I have a little hole here where I guess there would be another optional 12 volt. But what I decided to do when I open this up here in a couple days or maybe even tomorrow, to get the heater installed in there, I got to pull off the seat to get in there and get the diesel heater. So what I got online is I bought this little plug, and I'm going to drill this out a little more and pop that in there, just so if I'm up front and I need to charge a laptop, or my daughter is charging her, maybe she's watching TV in a laptop in the passenger seat, I just want to have access to an AC outlet right there. So that's just something I just did today, just thinking about it, and thought it'd be a cool idea. And then having that single plug, it'll be out of the way. It won't be a big giant outlet. So anyways, these wires here, this is the signal wire. These are my 2 4-gauge wires. I got some, what's the word I'm looking for? Conduit. That I put over in kind of the braces, and this thing is open at this point, but it's ran through there to the back. It looks like a mess in there. There's actually a big mess of these wires. There's actually factory stuff that went to speakers, all of these right here. So these, I'm just leaving them just till I figure out exactly what I want to do with them. I might run speakers, I might use them to run signal to maybe an amplifier, or I don't know. So for now, they're here. There's no rush to cut them out. But yeah, that's where we're at.